Video presentation, assessment in telecollaboration. A brief literature review. What is assessment? Assessment in general is a hot topic as educators strive to find a fair way to determine the value of what they expect students to do. According to Knight, 2001, although there are different types of assessment, they do not indicate that some types are better than others, as they are neutral, but simply that it is easier to match the type of assessment when one knows clearly what each assessment task is for. For instance, Knight 2001 lists 50 different assessment methods available in the literature, such as artifacts, products, especially in fashion design and engineering, etc. Assessment as gatekeeping. Students gain entry to classes only on production of bullet point summaries, etc. Assessment banks, where students have access to a question and answer bank. They learn how to answer all of them, but are assessed on a sample of those. Assessment of work-based learning in a variety of ways, many times by a variety of people for different purposes. Book, website, or program reviews, to name just the first 5. In general terms, whatever the type of assessment, they tend to either measure performance, summative assessment, or identify areas for improvement, formative assessment. Assessment in telecollaboration. Tasks are then central to assessment, and as such, task design, not only in telecollaboration, is of utter importance, and as suggested by Guth and Helm's 2012 advice, requires consideration of the specificities of the online context to be effective, amongst other things. For instance, will assessment be summative assessment or assessment of learning? AOL, as discussed by Hounsel, Shu, and Tai 2007, where feed out officializes some sort of guarantee that the learner has acquired some competence, and this is supported by a certificate of some kind. This is closely related to performance, and it is also high-stakes assessment. On the other hand, formative assessment or assessment for learning, A4L, Hounsel, Shu, and Tai 2007, which allows students to know what they need to move forward, means designing learning sequences that afford plenty of opportunities for good learning conversations arising from feedback on good tasks that are matched to course learning outcomes. Black and William, 1998, in Knight, 2001. With this in mind, then, assessment in telecollaboration can and must draw on constructive alignment principles, Biggs 2003, to help tutors differentiate learning outcomes from assessment criteria in their task design. In terms of language use alone, students will benefit from a clearer understanding of what is expected of them as tentative and definite language, and low and high level verbs used in task instructions will represent learning outcomes and assessment criteria respectively. If language is clear, then assessment will be too, both for tutors and students. Learning outcomes for tasks and assessment criteria when measuring achievement. Biggs 2003 mentions 4 steps for constructive alignment: defining intended learning outcomes, choosing designing activities which will lead to intended learning outcomes, assessing students' intended learning outcomes to see how closely they match what was intended, and the last one, arrive at a final grade by applying grade assessment criteria as suggested by Moon 2002. These are highly recommended to be taken into consideration when designing or using ready-made tasks like the ones available in O'Dowd and Ware's 2009 work. Assessment in telecollaboration would then actively adopt and apply Moon's 2002 grade assessment criteria in the form of rubrics, which allows students to self-assess on the go, as well as the implementation of Hounsel's et al.'s 2007 4 strategies for assessment: feed-forward assessments, cumulative coursework, better understood expectations and standards, and speedier feedback, which would set the ground for Carless's 2007 learning-oriented assessment. three elements: assessment tasks as learning tasks, student involvement in assessment as peer or self-evaluators, and feedback as feed-forward. This would possibly take assessment in telecollaboration to the next step by making students not only task executors but active participants in their own assessment and learning. Assessment of telecollaboration activities and Web 2.0 technologies. Web 2.0 technologies seem to be in every learning setting, and foreign language learning is no exception. Assessment, then, being part and parcel of learning, needs to make use of the same Web 2.0 technologies in order to reflect this new type of learning as suggested by O'Dowd 2010. Lamy and Hampel 2007 in O'Dowd 2010 page 338 suggest that assessment is struggling to catch up because Web 2.0 learning is still in its adolescence, and Stockwell 2006 states how Web 2.0 work is still being assessed via traditional techniques and technologies. It is then not anymore a matter of just language learning, but also a matter of enabling students to develop intercultural communicative competence, or ICC. Schneider and von der Emde 2006 in O'Dowd 2010, and the role technologies play a central role in the process. Walker and White 2011 argue that technology creates new possibilities for assessment, and so I wonder whether technology is being underutilized in telecollaboration assessment because the focus is more on the technologies used for the exchange while still falling back on traditional methods to measure student performance. Walker and White 2011 mentioned several options for assessment, but the one that attracts my attention because of the work involved in telecollaboration projects is portfolios. I would argue that this type of assessment can be both summative and formative, would be in Knight's terms 2001 a better match for the types of tasks available. One important aspect of assessment is that we often forget it is bilateral, teacher-students, and so students are often also involved in some sort of assessment of the course and tutors. Dooley, 2008, advises partner teachers to practice what they preach, and as telecollaborators, I believe this is to be important as it adds face value and rigor to our work. Dooley, 2008, also makes a case for peer work for learning and self-monitoring of progress as essential for learning, where less marks, more well-made comments, page 152, seem to lead to better results based on her experience. Telecollaboration and the Common European Framework of Reference. Due to the fact that telecollaboration is about cultural and language exchanges, it is not surprising that the Common European Framework of Reference, Council of Europe Modern Languages Division 2001, be brought to the game at some stage. O'Dowd's 2010 analysis of the links between telecollaboration and the CEFR are indeed interesting, albeit not new, and rather close to the concept of mediation, the conveyance of received information, especially so in the context of ICC. He uses the term when stating that, open inverted commas, communicating in a foreign language has as much to do with understanding and mediating with different cultural perspectives as with exchange of information, page 341, close inverted commas, or I would dare say conveyance of received information. As regards assessment, the use of criteria, grids, and rubrics, as mentioned before, are in line with O'Dowd's 2010 argument, as open inverted commas, descriptive scales allow teachers and students to identify, close inverted commas, where they are. It is also exciting to see that the lack of descriptors identified in 2010 is to a certain extent currently being addressed by the work being carried out by the CEFR, Council of Europe Modern Languages Division 2001, in terms of mediation descriptors, which started in 2013, Council of Europe Modern Languages Division 2013. For instance, two specific mediation descriptors categories, especially relevant to telecollaboration, are the two new scales: online interaction, online conversation and discussion, goal-oriented online transactions and collaboration, Council of Europe Modern Languages Division 2013. The other descriptors under revision are also relevant because of the nature of telecollaboration: cognitive and relational mediation, with the former including descriptors at spoken level for constructing meaning, collaborating to construct meaning and generating conceptual talk, conveying received meaning, relaying specific information in speech, explaining data, graphs, diagrams, etc. in speech, processing an entire text or texts, interpreting, spoken translation of written text, sight translation, and the latter covering facilitating relationships, facilitating collaborative interaction, managing interaction in plenary and in groups, resolving delicate situations and disagreements. Similarly, at written level, cognitive mediation involves conveying received meaning, relaying specific information in writing, explaining data, graphs, diagrams, etc. in writing, processing an entire text or texts, and translating. Mediation strategies are also equally important for telecollaboration, as negotiation of meaning is at the heart of any exchange. Establishing a positive atmosphere, establishing connections, amplifying text, streamlining text, breaking down complicated information, visually representing information, and adjusting language. The above helps better understand that the difference between intercultural competence IC and intercultural communicative competence ICC is important because of the implications alluded to by Byram 1997 in O'Dowd 2010, namely that it is done in a foreign language. In addition, Byram's 1997 ethical and moral stated issues with assessing students and the question posed is intriguing. Do I have the right to grade students for showing interest in how Culture 2 members perceive the world? What about bias? Culture 1 beliefs, controversial views, for example, Israel and Palestine? In this respect, Burnett et al.'s 2014 questions regarding the extension of the value of rubrics, acknowledging the environment of rubrics, and managing the scale of factors affected by these require special attention. For instance, their mention of value gained from video, audio, and screen annotation tools, amongst others, could be seen as listening to Walker and White's 2011 suggestions about how Web 2.0 create new possibilities for assessment. While their acknowledgement of the environment of rubrics is described within their context, and as such it may be seen as not immediately applicable in other different contexts, I would argue that what transpires as applicable is that assessment practices, particularly as embodied in a programmatic rubric, must flexibly and quickly respond to new environmental cues from students, teachers, research, and institutional and societal factors. I would further argue that these cues would depend again on context, as private language schools would certainly find it easier to implement this flexibility and response, thanks to the fact that management is often more straightforward than in tertiary education institutions, as it is Walker and White's 2011 context. Finally, as regards the management of the scale of factors affected by rubrics, it seems that the main concern in their context is that of increasing understanding of the scale at different levels, which again may not be immediately applicable to contexts where telecollaboration is in its initial stages, for instance in mine. Issues in the assessment of telecollaboration. As regards O'Dowd's 2010 overview of research on issues in the assessment of online interaction, the results which established a clear link between online assessment and participation are not surprising. I would also go as far as to say that participation is not and cannot be unilateral, that is, one direction in which the teacher assesses the students, but bilateral, as online students also assess tutors in terms of their online participation, that is, their online presence. Martinez, 2014. Another finding which is related to the importance given in online assessment to affective aspects of students' online interaction, that is how effectively students handle, intertwine, and build on ICC, their communication exchanges, in my own words. Finally, the last finding was that the acknowledgement of tutors' own difficulty in how to evaluate ICC, which in my opinion points to the need for development in this area, with possibly an emphasis on both portfolios and assessment rubrics, as reflect the differentiates both assessment tools could support not only educators but also students in the production of tangible evidence, which becomes then more measurable. telecollaboration assessment and the teacher's perspective. There's no doubt that for the beginner telecollaborator, getting started, let alone also understanding how to assess a telecollaborative exchange, may seem a gargantuan task, with projects possibly being perceived as chaotic and messy. However, the literature seems to indicate that this is mainly related to teaching style and level of control teachers are used to exercising in the classroom, so pondering on Dooley's 2008 big question may be the key to reaching a compromise or striking a balance in terms of involvement, with the teacher deciding whether they will be managers or facilitators. This also applies to assessment in that while with other types of classroom activity, assessment can be more straightforward when they are progress or achievement tests, presentations, etc., assessing telecollaborative exchange is not immediately clear, as has been discussed so far. Approaching telecollaboration from a teacher's perspective could be argued to also intrinsically include assessment, as part of a teacher's job is that of measuring what the students do and to what extent. With this in mind, Dooley 2008 makes valuable recommendations for telecollaborative teachers to bear in mind, which I would argue are not an option but rather must-dos. For example, being aware of teaching style is essential, as telecollaborative tasks should reflect an active learning approach, which is often open-ended as opposed to a more traditional and obsolete teacher-centered stance. Assessment is then not of learners alone, but also of ourselves as teachers and what we do in order to promote effective and successful activities. We need to be ready to assess ourselves first, ensure that we are doing is indeed in line with telecollaboration guidelines and the available literature to guarantee a degree of success. This can be done by referring to the work of Dooley 2008A, B, Dooley, Massatz, Muller, Hartman, and Caballero de Rodas 2012, Dooley and O'Dowd 2012, Lamy and Goodfellow 2010, O'Dowd and Ware 2009, O'Dowd 2010, amongst others as discussed here. Assessment is not seen as a set of criteria which is only applied to telecollaborative exchanges and to students, but to ourselves from the very beginning, and as a way of walking the talk. Dooley et al. 2012 suggests that in order to guarantee successful partnerships between telecollaborative partners, they should meet where possible, face-to-face or virtually, and follow the same orientation suggested for students so that they themselves can identify in practice, self-assess in order to inform task and student assessment, what works and what doesn't before bringing in the students. By getting to know each other well, partner tutors, and being specific as to when and how often to meet, discussing local circumstances thoroughly and covering as many aspects before the project as possible, will allow them not only to self-assess in terms of preparation, but also to prepare a contingency plan and gain a better understanding of what assessment criteria mean. This is especially so as having self-assess their own preparation for the project will enable them to better see how the chosen or established criteria apply to the students. In a sense, this could be seen as carrying out their own mini telecollaborative project before launching on the one they will be leading the students in, a sort of trial run if you wish. Telecollaborative tasks, design and assessment. Drawing on the work of O'Dowd and Ware 2009, it becomes evident that their detailed set of telecollaborative tasks can be a starting point for the novice telecollaborator, not only as valuable suggestions for successful telecollaborative experiences, but also as a basis for assessment and the establishment of basic assessment criteria. It could be argued that starting from the study of the proposed tasks so as to be familiar with them and also aware of their increasing level of difficulty would then be easier for the beginner telecollaborator to determine assessment for learning criteria that start from intended learning outcomes based on these tasks themselves. In addition, these intended learning outcomes could help partner teachers in the decision-making process as to whether the task should be chosen by the teachers or by the students themselves, in line with Dooley 2008 and O'Dowd and Ware's 2009 work. With this in mind, assessment for learning becomes an integral part of the telecollaborative process, as the tasks and the way they are defined by the partner teachers, not only applying them as they are, would provide students with plenty of opportunities for good learning conversations arising from feedback on good tasks that are matched to course learning outcomes, as mentioned initially by Knight 2001. It becomes evident then that it is of the essence to be fully aware and critical of our own and our partners' teachings, beliefs, and styles. Not to take the tasks offered by O'Dowd and Ware 2009 or any other suggestions as they are, but to assess them and ourselves in relation to our context, our students, and our intended learning outcomes. While choosing which tasks to implement, it would make sense to attend to O'Dowd's and Ware's and Dooley's findings by ensuring that, especially at the beginning, tasks are similar or at least within the same set to facilitate adaptation, execution, and assessment of the same. For instance, tasks for the project could all be from the given information exchange tasks, in parentheses, authoring cultural autobiographies, carrying out virtual interviews, engaging in informal discussion, and exchanging story collections, rather than from different ones as was done in case study 1, where tutors chose tasks 3, set 1, engaging in informal discussion, and task 10, set 3, transforming text genres, which, as mentioned before, are also at different levels of difficulty. This approach seems to be supported by the evidence in case study 2, where it is suggested that the success of these instructors lies, amongst other things, in their planning and preparation and their choosing straightforward, predictable tasks, which allowed students to find their own ways to connect with their partners. O'Dowd and Ware 2009. This in turn is nothing else but what argued by Guth and Helms 2012 as regards task design. Open inverted commas. It requires consideration of the specificities of the online context to be effective. Close inverted commas.